Now we're 10 years into OpenAI, and the viability of OpenAI is what everyone seems to be talking about. Some projections show that they will run out of money as early as 2027. But that's not the only story that's circulating. There are already different poly market on OpenAI. You have people betting on OpenAI's market cap when it IPOs at various valuations. You also have people betting on whether government will step in to backstop OpenAI before July. And then you have people who are betting on OpenAI being acquired before 2027. So ahead of us, following the trajectory since OpenAI's inception, we have different scenarios where 1. OpenAI could become bankrupt after running out of investors. 2. OpenAI seeking funding from the public after their IPO. 3. OpenAI receiving funding from the government. 4. OpenAI being acquired by other companies like Microsoft. 5. A combination of any of these. While these outcomes surely don't cover all possible scenarios that we might see as we go into the year 2027 and onwards, today we're going to review the bear cases around OpenAI and see what the numbers look like around them. Welcome to Caleb Writes Code, where every second counts. Quick shout out to Brilliant, more on them later. Let's start by putting down all the bear cases of OpenAI and address each of these while presenting both perspectives on each item here. Starting with free user subsidization burden. ChatGPT has more than 800 million weekly active users, which is practically around 10% of the world population. But only 5% of the ChatGPT users are currently paid users. Still an insane amount of numbers and undeniably an impressive number, but based on a revenue model from HSBC, OpenAI needs to gain around 3 billion users by 2030 with 10% paid users. In other words, as they grow their user base from 800 million users to 3 billion users, they also need to double their percentage of their user base that are paid users in the next 4 years. And the figure here is somewhat confirmed by OpenAI as they're targeting over 200 million paid users by 2030, which could bring OpenAI somewhere between $48 billion to $72 billion, depending on where you end up between the figures of 2 to 300 million paid users. Keep in mind that they have to execute on this while also competing against other frontier labs, which I'll get more into as we talk about the losing market share later. But even at 300 million paid users, OpenAI still needs to subsidize the remaining 2.7 billion users who are using their platform for free. And OpenAI recently announced integration of ads for free and Go subscription users, likely knowing that trying to scale while at the same time trying to subsidize their costs are at odds with each other. Now let's talk about their revenue projection. So given the 200 to 300 paid users by 2030, assuming that OpenAI does achieve this target, we're looking at $48 to $72 billion, but they likely don't come close in covering their expenses just from the subscription revenue alone. OpenAI targets that they will be making $174 billion by 2030, which means that even at an optimistic target of $72 billion from the 300 million paid users of ChatGPT, they still need to make up the remaining $100 billion elsewhere, likely from a mix of revenue streams like consumer hardware, where they are rumored to start in the second half of 2026, and 40 million devices should be ready to be sold, but even this remains speculative. Another source of revenue is from API and agents as agentic applications and API use cases for coding and agents continue to grow. While unlike subscriptions, API tend to be more commoditized since people switch between APIs on a dime. And there's really no competitive edge as long as competition among other frontier labs sustains at the current levels. But as aggregate demand for agents continue to grow, API and agents will likely continue to bring substantial amount of revenue for OpenAI. Enterprise use cases for OpenAI is also another source of revenue where companies like Perplexity and Harvey use OpenAI's models likely through licensing to build their unique product under it. And recently, OpenAI CFO Sarah Friar also made some rather strange case for revenue source of having some kind of royalty deal if OpenAI contributed towards making a breakthrough that took off in the market adoption. Another revenue source for OpenAI is their ad integration to their platform for free and Go users. While ad network and its distribution is fairly well established, it would still be really interesting to see how ChatGPT and ad impressions and conversion value might actually work out and how much revenue that will actually bring for OpenAI. And given the sheer size and the number of users that OpenAI has, this should secure a decent portion of their revenue. Now let's talk about the losing market share. And this requires a lot of problem solving. Brilliant is an online platform that helps you learn problem solving skills. This video is sponsored by Brilliant. Brilliant helps you excel in math and computer science with visual, interactive problem solving and personalized practice. It's designed to make your own progress through active problem solving to reach your own goals just like this. You can also learn with your own personalized practice where the system really matches your ideal pace, and also become a better thinker and problem solver through their math challenges that are full of hands-on concepts until it makes sense for you. For those who are interested in learning more about coding and computer science, this is an example of Brilliant's platform. You can get a 30-day free trial using the link in the description below and get a 20% discount on the annual premium subscription. It's no surprise that ChatGPT has been losing their market share in both their chat application as more people are seeing Gemini and more recently Claude as a better tool, as well as in API use cases as the underlying large language model is getting good across the board. Gemini recently reached 650 million monthly active users, which is still smaller compared to the 800 million weekly active users. Although the exact way of how they actually measure this metrics isn't really known, it's no secret that OpenAI has been losing their market share increasingly. And based on the previous projection, where we need to have 3 billion weekly active users, which is more than 35% of the world population by 2030, the number starts to look a little bit optimistic. And OpenAI isn't the only frontier lab that's trying to gain mass adoption. And if you look at it from the user's perspective and look at all the price points of all the other frontier labs that are offering the same kind of service, even though pricing is relatively similar, OpenAI doesn't really have the killer app that hooks the users in. Google has their entire ecosystem built into their pricing, Anthropic has Claude code usage, Grok has X or Twitter, so until OpenAI can blend in a killer app or even a physical device that's coming in 2026, OpenAI is likely going to have much more turbulence than a straight shot up to the 3 billion users going into 2030. Now, funding is likely where the strongest bear case there is when we talk about OpenAI's viability going into 2027. OpenAI finished 2025 with Series F led by SoftBank, who had to bend over backwards in liquidating their positions elsewhere after a small hiccup just to close this deal by 2025 year end. While OpenAI so far raised an aggregate amount of more than $60 billion from various hedge funds, private equity, venture capitals, and banks through a mix of debt and mostly capital in order to execute their business plan in really achieving their revenue target as we discussed, they're in the hole for the next 3 to 4 years. Some people estimate that in order to get there, OpenAI needs to secure an additional $207 billion by 2030, which is 3.5 times more than what they have raised so far. And this gap here is really where the crossroad meets with all other bear cases into one topic. OpenAI is targeting their next funding round of $50 billion from funds, including additional money from UAE, and a lot of people here are concerned how OpenAI will continue to fill this very gap to get to their goal. This is where you have people speculating in the poly market that the government will step in to fill the gap, or that it will be funded by the public through their IPO in 2027, or that OpenAI will go through some kind of acquisition just like all the other acquisition that has been occurring in the AI industry so far. Let's move on to talents. In the midst of all the funding concerns, there are also a lot of internal politics around OpenAI's AI engineers and talents leaving the firm. I would say that while talent is absolutely important in building the next generation AI models, I think it's fair to say that OpenAI isn't the only company suffering from shuffling of talents. There are only so many brilliant scientists that can really disrupt this industry. Aside from these bigger line items that show concerns around OpenAI's next couple of years, we also have small but potentially concerning items like Elon Musk's lawsuit asking for $134 billion, which is totally meant to basically kill OpenAI, and also Sam Altman's public relations as more and more people have their opinions about him get sour. Now, given all these things we just covered, I think I tend to lean more into the concept that OpenAI is just simply too big to fail. There are too many players at stake, There are too many VCs, banks, and the economy at stake for OpenAI to simply just run out of money and fail. I think the most likely case is that OpenAI will continue to grow their revenue the best they can in the short term through a mix of different services they will offer while securing funding to bridge them going into 2027 when they'll eventually have an IPO and shift the demand of funding OpenAI's spending to public investors. I think it's in their best interest to rush into IPO while people are still relatively optimistic about AI's potentials rather than waiting until 2030 after they secure their 20 to 30 gigawatts of data centers, because who knows by then what the landscape of AI will look like, given that they're already losing so much ground in the market share. What do you think? What do you think the likely scenario for OpenAI will be, given what we just talked about OpenAI? Do you think there are more imminent concerns with CoreWeave and Oracle than OpenAI's future?